Welcome everybody then to the Crap Car Collective review of 2022. This was the second full year of the channel and it's been full of brilliant cars, awful cars and some mediocre ones in between. Didn't do one of these videos last year, so this is the first time I've kind of done a full review of the last 12 months. So, well, let's get started back in January. So back in January, I was driving the 2001 plate Ford Focus, the 1.4 LX, I think it was. I picked that up in October 2021. I have to say, one of the best cars I've ever bought. Picked up for 450 quid, needed a little bit of welding that cost about 200. Didn't really owe me that much money in the end. And I must have done, I don't know how many thousands of miles I did off the top of my head, but it kind of got me through a period where I was a little bit tight financially back in college doing a master's. It was faultless. I say faultless, the front brakes did bind, which had to be fixed, and a rear brake pipe exploded when I was coming up to a crossroads junction, which left me pretty much brakeless. Thankfully, it was a rather empty country road, and a combination of panic braking and a bit of handbrake action saved the day. But look, I'm going to forgive it that. It was a wonderful machine. I sold it on then in February to a gentleman who gave me, I think it was around 700 or 800 quid. So I think I might have made 100 quid profit on that one altogether, which I was delighted with. That doesn't happen very often with the old machines that I buy. So after the Ford Focus then came the Peugeot 106. The 106 was a decent little car. Look, I had really high hopes for it, but it didn't really gel with me. I didn't really feel that much of a connection to it, sadly. To be honest, I don't think that was a problem of the 106. It was a problem of mine. As I said before, I was back in college, financially not particularly good really at that point, so it needed a bit of work doing to it. Needed the brakes do, it needed a few other little bits. I just wasn't in a position to start throwing money at that car. I probably should have got it for a slightly cheaper price and did sell it at a slight loss. Story of the old cars that I buy. It happens to quite a lot of them, sadly. So yeah, that one, I'd love to try it again. I'd love another 106 at some stage. Will I get another chance to try one? I'm sure I will at some point, but probably not for the foreseeable future. The 106 then, good car. I didn't really gel with it, but again, not a fault of the 106, is more of a fault of mine. After the 106 then came a car that I quite dearly love and cannot see myself getting rid of anytime soon, the Volvo V40. So I spotted the V40 on Done Deal. Now the owner was looking for €1,800. I thought a little bit steep, although it did have a decent stretch of NCT, I think until October, so a good six months on that, and a decent one of tax until November, and the tax is $670 for the year with the ridiculously extortionate Irish motor tax rates. So I thought, actually, it's probably not that bad of a deal. So text the owner, message the owner, and kind of sussing out what kind of ballpark price they would accept. She got back to me saying that somebody had offered her 1,100, and I said, bang, I'll give you 12. So I hopped on the train, went down to collect it. Soon as I drove it, I thought, oh, I really, really like this. Automatic, full leather, cruise control, climate control, fantastic condition, full service history. I would have been a fool not to buy it. So the monies were exchanged and the V40 was mine. It's one of few cars I've owned over this last couple of years that's really gelled with me, that I've really fallen for. One being probably the red Renault Clio that I had last year. That was a fantastic little car. But the V40 is just absolutely wonderful. It's serenely comfortable. It just glides along. Yeah, it's quite expensive to run. Can be quite expensive to maintain, to tax and to put fuel in. Of course, it's a 1.8 petrol automatic, so not particularly fuel efficient in these cost of living crisis times. But the trade-off for that is superior comfort, leather interior, cruise control, ease of use, smoothness of driving. Look, it's just absolutely wonderful. And I haven't done too many videos on it. I suppose it's just been so fantastically reliable and just there for me whenever I need it that I haven't really had to document anything going wrong on it. I will, though, in the new year do lots more videos on the Volvo. It's just had a service and the timing belt done. So yeah, it's good to drive. I'm pretty much dailying it at the minute. Says me sitting in the Nissan Micra. More on that later. But yeah, the Volvo is staying on the fleet and I just love it to bits. The next purchase after the Volvo was the mighty Mazda Demio. I say mighty, that word's doing quite a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. Look, It was a fine car. I just didn't fall for it and didn't gel with it. I didn't even particularly like it, to be perfectly honest, after a couple of days. There was nothing really wrong with the car. I drove it a few days after buying it all the way to Galway and back, a couple of 100 kilometres each way. It took me about 2.5, 3 hours. Look, it handled motorways fine. It handled town driving absolutely fine. Its poverty spec, though, did annoy me a little bit, and that's very unlike me to say. I love poverty spec cars. They're really mundane. The more ordinary, the better. But one thing that really bugged me was it didn't have a fuel warning light. And you'll see in the videos on the channel that I did run out of fuel once, which, you know, for a car that, you know, in the grand scheme of things isn't even that old, it's only 20 odd years old, was really, really ridiculously, stupidly just poor, really, from Mazda. Fit a fuel warning light. And no, before you say it wasn't because there was a blown fuse or no bulb, I checked the owner's handbook and had a little look at the fuel warning gauge printed in the handbook, and it said, next to the fuel warning light, little asterisks on some models, and I thought, that is utterly ridiculous. So that really annoyed me. As well, I was driving it one day, clonked it into a curb when I was parking, rather foolishly, which damaged the tracking and some elements of the front suspension. I don't know which bit exactly. I noticed as I was driving it, when you go around right-hand corners and then left as well, as time went on, you get an awful snap of steering whenever you steered, and that was terrifying when you were doing anything other than 50 kilometres, you know, 20, 30 miles an hour or whatever. That was really, really quite scary. So I listed it on Done Deal, noted the faults. A young lad picked it up, bought it off me. I did tell him to be extremely careful driving it home. Didn't hear back from him, so I hope he got home safely. The reason I purchased the little Mazda Demio in the first place was because it was at the height of summer, July, August 2020, and fuel costs were through the roof. They're still pretty expensive now, but at that point it was astronomical. I was paying around €2.10 a litre for petrol, sometimes even more on occasion. So I needed something that was a lot more fuel economical than the Volvo. I was doing around 90 miles a day round trip for work at that stage, and money wasn't great. So I thought, you know what, I need a much smaller car on the fleet. So I had a little look, got the Demio, fell out of love with it, got rid, but still needed a small car. So I had a little look on Facebook Marketplace. I came across this, the mundane K11 Micra. The young lad that was selling it wanted around £1,000, and I thought, look, that's a little bit too much. It did have a couple of weeks tax on it, and it has an NCT, the Irish MOT, until May 2023, 31st of May. And I thought, okay, that's obviously huge positives. He was looking for, as I said, £1,000. So I sent him a few texts, tried to kind of suss him out a little bit, agreed to go down and view the car. In the course of that text exchange, though, I asked him, I said, where are you with price? Are you happy to accept an offer? And he said, yeah, well, my mate's offered me €450. He just can't get the money for a couple of weeks because he doesn't get paid until the end of the month. And I thought, okay, in the space of about 2 texts, I've managed to knock £550 off the price. Happy days, I'm in here. So I went down to view it, took it for a little test drive, and I said, listen, I've got £550 here in cash. What about that? And he said, yeah, okay. I've got a new Golf on the drive and I really want to get rid of this, so it's yours. And I thought, happy days, I've just snagged a fully road legal car in a cost of living crisis for just €550. Happy days. And here it is. There's plenty of videos of this up on the page, so have a little look if you want to catch up with the mundane Micra shenanigans. As you can see, obviously, I still own the Micra. There's one more car, though, that I've added to the fleet since then. That one more car is, of course, the €200 calamitous Renault Clio, or as it's also known as the infamous Bray Clio. I'm not going to go too far into the history and all that kind of stuff and all the information that I've got on the car or whatever. You can have a look at the other videos on the channel for all of that, because it's well documented. But basically, I had known about the car since June 2017 and had seen it a few other times when I was up and about in Bray in County Wicklow, which is about, half an hour from Dublin. So I thought to myself, yeah, I'd love to own that one day. So in February this year, 2022, I left a note under the windscreen wiper. Never thought I'd hear anything back, but just to cover it, because, you know, I like the car, I said, well, if it's ever up for sale, I'm going to get first dibs. So I'm sitting down then in October one Saturday afternoon having a cup of tea, and the phone rings. And it's the owner offering me the Clio. It's after having failed its Irish MOT, the NCT. And I thought, well, obviously this is price dependent, but yeah, I'm having it. Offered the owner £200, and a couple of days later went down to collect it, and it was mine. That one is still on the fleet, one of the 3 cars, the Volvo, this, and of course now the little Clio. There is going to be plenty of Clio action in 2023. There's already been lots of it over the last couple of weeks since I bought it in October. But there's going to be plenty more coming on the channel with regards to that. That's it then for the 2022 Crap Car Collective review of the year. I've had a fantastic time documenting and owning some really rather awful and some really rather good cars during the course of the year. I want to say a big thank you to everybody who has tweeted, messaged, conversed with me in any way on Instagram, on Twitter, on YouTube, and all the new subscribers, and everybody who's viewed any of my content. I really do appreciate it. Here is then to another wildly and mildly interesting 2023.